Hi, I'm Leora. Right after my C-section, still bleeding, barely able to breathe, he stormed into my hospital room, pointed at our newborn, and screamed, "That baby isn't mine." Then he tore the birth certificate in half and walked away. He left because our son's skin was darker, because truth didn't fit his family's version of love. For 10 years, I raised that boy alone. Every birthday, every fever, every question about the father who disappeared. And then, one envelope arrived. A DNA test. 3 words that changed everything. 998% probability. He thought silence would bury the truth. Turns out, it was just waiting to rise. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening and where are you from? Drop a comment below. Because tonight, you're about to hear how the truth shut him up forever. The room smelled of antiseptic and something sweet, like powdered milk and plastic. I could still feel the tremor in my legs when the nurse placed the baby on my chest. His skin was soft, damp, and warm as the morning light. For a few seconds, the world shrank to his breathing, the small weight of him pressing against me, the way his fingers curled around the edge of the blanket I'd stitched by hand weeks before. "Tomas," I whispered, my voice barely more than air. "Welcome home, sweetheart." The nurse smiled faintly, then adjusted the IV beside me. The hallway beyond the door hummed with faint lullaby music, the kind hospitals play to mark new births. I was floating between pain and peace, that thin line where exhaustion and love look almost the same. And then the door burst open. Dorian's voice cracked through the silence before I even saw him. "What the hell is this?" He stood at the foot of the bed, his face red with anger, suit still sharp from the night before. Behind him, his mother hovered, her perfume arriving before her words. "Dorian," I whispered, clutching the baby instinctively. "Please, not now." He stepped closer, his eyes darting between me and the newborn. Then he said it, the sentence that split my world in half. "That baby isn't mine." The nurse froze. Her gloved hands hovered midair, like she'd forgotten what they were supposed to do. "Excuse me?" My voice trembled, but I still tried to sound calm, rational. "What are you talking about?" "Look at him," Dorian said sharply. "Look at his skin. You really expect me to believe—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The silence in the room filled in the rest. The nurse, Mara Lynn, opened her mouth, maybe to defend me, maybe to call for help, but Dorian's mother spoke first, her tone cold enough to frost glass. "We'll handle this privately," she said, each word clipped and precise. "This family has already endured enough embarrassment." Embarrassment. That's what they called it. I tried to breathe, tried to find the words. "He's yours, Dorian. You were here. Every appointment, every ultrasound." He wasn't listening. His eyes were sharp, searching for a lie in my face. He grabbed the clipboard from the nurse's hand, scanned the top line, and tore the birth certificate in half. The sound, it wasn't just paper ripping. It was something deeper, like a thread snapping inside me. Mara Lynn gasped, stepping forward. "Sir, please!" But he was already turning away, the shredded pages fluttering down to the floor. One half landed near my feet, and I saw what was left of my name. Leo. Blood soaked through the gown at my waist. The pain from the C-section pulsed with my heartbeat, but it wasn't the wound that hurt. It was the way everyone in the room stared at me like I was a stranger caught doing something shameful. Dorian didn't look back. His mother brushed past the nurse, murmuring something about keeping this out of the family papers. When the door shut, it made a small, clean sound, like a drawer closing on something you never meant to see again. For a long time, no one moved. The monitor beeped steadily beside me. The baby whimpered, his tiny face scrunching, as if he already understood that something in this room had broken. Marilyn crouched down, gently picking up the torn paper. Her voice was soft. "I saw everything," she said. "All of it." I nodded once, unable to speak. My throat burned, but my eyes stayed dry. After she left, the room fell back into its steady rhythm. Machines, air vents, the faint hum of a world that didn't care. I reached for the small blanket folded beside me, the one I'd embroidered during those quiet nights waiting for him. Across the corner, in pale blue thread, I'd stitched the words, "Truth will keep you warm." My hands shook as I wrapped Tomas in it. He opened his eyes for the first time, a shade deeper than mine, darker maybe, but his, ours. "You're mine," I whispered, kissing his forehead. "That's enough." Outside, a cart rolled by, and somewhere down the hall another lullaby began to play. The melody slipped under the door, soft and distant, like a song from a different world. The window glass reflected the edge of the torn paper on the floor. My name still visible, half a promise waiting to be finished. As the sun began to fade behind the city skyline, I pressed Tomas closer to my chest, feeling his heartbeat steady against mine. The silence stretched long and heavy, but I didn't cry. As the hospital door closed behind them, I realized that silence can be louder than any scream. The silence didn't leave me when I got home. It clung to the corners of my apartment like smoke after a fire, invisible but choking. Tomas slept most of the time, unaware that the world outside his blanket had turned its back on him. I watched him breathe, soft and steady, while I lay awake at night listening to the clock tick and the ache in my stitches whisper, "You're not done yet." A week later, Petra's message popped up on my phone like a landmine. "Mom wants to talk. For closure." Closure. That word felt rehearsed, too clean. Still, I packed the diaper bag, dressed Tomas in something warm, and slid the white embroidered blanket over his tiny body. Maybe, just maybe, Dorian would be there. Maybe he'd look at our son and see something real. Maybe he'd say sorry. I should have known better. The Cade family home sat tucked behind a tall gate in suburban Houston. All red brick, trimmed hedges, and forced smiles. As I walked up the path, the wind tugged at my coat. I held Tomas closer and whispered, "This won't take long, baby. Just some grown-ups pretending they care." Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and old tension. They were already seated. Dorian's mother Marvell, his father Victor, Petra, and two of his uncles I barely knew. Dorian sat at the far end of the living room, his arms crossed, face blank. Not one of them stood when I walked in. Marvell gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Leora, thank you for coming." I sat down slowly, my eyes scanning the room. No one looked at Tomas. No one asked how I was healing. She folded her hands like she was about to pray. "We all just want what's best for you and the child. But Dorian, he's struggling. He can't live with this kind of doubt. It's tearing him apart." My pulse quickened. "Doubt," I said. "There are tests. We can take a DNA test. This isn't the 1950s. Victor interrupted. "It's not about science. It's about trust." I blinked. Trust? Petra looked away. Dorian stared at the fireplace, like there was something burning that only he could see. "You're all talking like I'm not even in the room," I said. "Like I'm some scandal you need to wrap up before dinner." No one answered. I adjusted Tomas in my arms, his tiny fingers curling into my sleeve. He stirred, let out a little sound. Still, Dorian didn't look. Then Marvel reached down beside her chair and pulled out an envelope. She slid it across the coffee table like it was part of a business deal. "This," she said, "should help you start fresh, quietly. No lawyers, no public scene." My breath caught. I didn't touch the envelope. "You think you can pay for silence," I said, voice flat, "when you already stole my name off a birth certificate?" Petra's lips pressed into a line. Victor cleared his throat. Dorian finally glanced at the envelope, not me. Marvel's eyes turned ice cold. Then leave. Don't come back. Dorian mumbled, "You made your choice." I stood. My legs were shaky, but I held Tomas like armor. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Tomas whimpered, unsettled by the tension. I rocked him gently, pulling the white blanket up higher. His head rested against my chest, and I whispered, "Shh, I've got you." Marvel's voice sliced through the room like a knife. "Maybe you should wash that thing. It looks dirty." I stopped. The words weren't about the blanket, not really. I tightened my grip around Tomas. I looked right at her. "He's not dirty. He's the only clean thing here." She looked away. For a second, just one, I thought I saw shame. Or maybe it was just the light catching her rage. I stepped toward the door. Petra didn't move. Victor kept his eyes on the floor. Dorian, he didn't say a word. The front door opened with a creak and closed behind me with a click that echoed like a final sentence. Outside, the sky was gray, thick with the kind of clouds that never rain, just hover and judge. I didn't look back, not once. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I finally understood. Some families don't want the truth. They just want you to shut up and disappear. And I wasn't disappearing. I was starting over. On my terms. I thought walking away would give me peace, but peace doesn't visit those who carry ghosts. Instead, it moved in with me. Quiet, weightless, but always present. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom tucked behind a bus stop and a rundown grocery store, with cracked linoleum floors and walls that whispered when the wind blew. The kitchen sink leaked. The paint peeled. The ceiling fan clicked with every turn like it was trying to count the days. I didn't have a nursery, just a second-hand crib someone gave me at church, and a drawer that held folded onesies and the white blanket I couldn't bear to stop using. The words I stitched, "Truth will keep you warm," had started to fade, but I still ran my fingers over them every night like prayer beads. Tomas cried a lot in those early months. I cried quietly with him. I found work at a local laundromat, a back-office job counting receipts and managing petty cash. It didn't pay much, but the owner, Mrs. Ramirez, let me bring Tomas when I didn't have a sitter. At night, I tutored high school students online. Math mostly, sometimes writing. It was exhausting, but it was steady. I didn't make friends, not really. The neighbors nodded politely, but I could tell they sensed something haunted in me. People know when you're holding pieces together with thread and prayer. The only person from my old life who ever reached out was Marilyn, the nurse who'd seen it all. Once a year, she'd message me. We'd meet for coffee at a quiet corner cafe halfway between our homes. We didn't talk about what happened much. She knew I carried it every day. But she always said the same thing before we parted. "I still remember how he looked at you, like you were something to be erased." One afternoon, as she hugged me goodbye, she slipped an envelope into my diaper bag. "I shouldn't do this," she whispered, "but one day, you'll need it. Don't lose it." Inside was a photocopy of the hospital's archived birth certificate. The one before it was torn. My name, Tomas's name. No father listed, but no denial either. That night, I tucked it inside a notebook beneath my bed. It wasn't just paper, it was proof. That somewhere, quietly, the truth had survived. Tomas turned 5 this year. He's taller than other boys his age. Bright eyes, fast runner. He draws pictures of rockets and says he wants to be the kind of astronaut that never comes back. Lately, he's started asking questions. "Where's Daddy?" The first time he asked, I was slicing apples. I froze with the knife still in my hand. "He's far away," I said, "but he knows your name." It was only half a lie. At night, after he falls asleep, I sit by his bed. Sometimes I stare at his face. searching for mine. He has my mouth, but not my eyes. He has Dorian's hair, thick, dark, stubborn. I whisper things I can't say during the day. You look like him, but you're not him. You're better. I think of telling him the truth someday. But for now, I let the silence keep us safe. A few weeks ago, a letter came in the mail. A notice from the county courthouse. Legal language, cold language. Paternity denial finalized. No further child support obligations. I read it 3 times, standing over the kitchen sink. My hands didn't shake, my face didn't twist. I just stood there, absorbing the words like they were rain on old stone. Then I lit a match and watched it burn. The flames curled the corners of the paper, then swallowed it whole. Later that night, I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the white blanket. It smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. I held it in my lap and ran my thumb across the stitching, now worn soft from washing and years. Truth will keep you warm. Maybe not safe, maybe not whole, but warm. I've stopped waiting for Dorian to come back. I don't hope for apologies anymore. But one thing I swore, and I say it now, out loud, even if only to myself, my son will never grow up thinking truth needs permission. He'll know it's his birthright, his armor. Some people want to bury you quietly, but they don't realize even seeds bloom in silence. But the past has a cruel sense of timing. It always knocks when you've stopped expecting visitors. It had been quiet that morning. One of those rare Saturdays where nothing pressed in from the edges. Tomas had soccer practice at 10, and I had just finished folding a load of laundry when I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror by the hallway. I didn't look tired. That was a surprise. We lived in a modest 2-story townhouse now. Beige siding, tiny front yard, wind chimes near the porch. Mornings had their rhythm, eggs sizzling, Tomas asking too many questions, and the cat pawing at the back door like it had bills to pay. My little accounting business had grown. Word of mouth in the neighborhood kept me busy, and I liked it that way. I kept my mind full, my hours accounted for, my life simple. I'd long stopped speaking his name, even in therapy. I learned how to reference him without letting the syllables cross my lips. To the world, he was just the man who left. But forgetting is different from forgiving, and forgiving isn't the same as inviting. That afternoon, rain came in sheets. It blurred the windows, drummed on the mailbox, made the whole house sound like a heartbeat. I was in the kitchen, drying a mug, when I heard 3 knocks. Firm, heavy, familiar in the way a song you hate can still get stuck in your head. I opened the door, and there he was, Dorian, older, broader, dressed in a dark wool coat. His hair had gone grayer around the edges, and he'd grown into the kind of man who looked like he owned insurance companies. Behind him, idling by the curb, was a sleek black SUV. Inside sat Marvel, smaller now, worn by time, but still sitting like she ruled something. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice didn't shake, but something in my chest did. "I was hoping we could talk," he said, stepping forward. "Just a few minutes." He didn't wait for me to say yes. Inside, he looked around like a man walking through a museum exhibit titled Life Without Him. His eyes paused on the photos, Tomas smiling at the beach, our trip to Galveston, last year's science fair ribbon. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "This place is warm." I folded my arms. "Cut to it." He nodded. I thought maybe Tomas should know his family. That word, family. It landed like a rock in a bowl of soup. I laughed once, sharp and cold. "He does. You're just not part of it." Marvel's voice floated in from the doorway. "He's my grandson." I turned to her, slow and deliberate. "He was your grandson 10 years ago. You just didn't like the color of his skin." She didn't reply, just adjusted her scarf like it might hide her shame. Dorian cleared his throat, tried to wear the face of a reformed man. Look, I was wrong. I know that now. We made mistakes. Maybe we could work something out. For Tomas's sake. He pulled out a folder, laid it on the dining table like an offering. Inside, a bank statement, legal forms, and a new birth certificate. This time with his name printed neatly under father. I didn't touch it. You tore the first one, I said. You don't get to sign it back like a refund. He looked at me like I'd kicked him. But I'd learned, shame only sticks to people who believe they're wrong. You don't get to rewrite this, I continued, not because you've aged into guilt, not because your mother's getting sentimental. Something flickered behind his eyes, and that's when he said it. Well, we might need a DNA test soon anyway. Mom's health is declining. She's worried about inheritance. There it was. Not regret, not reconciliation, just money. I didn't say another word. When they left, I waited until the taillights vanished down the street. Then I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the folder. The paper was crisp, uncreased. I picked it up, walked it to the sink, and lit a match. The fire curled the edges like old paper curling under heat, and the documents turned to ash in seconds. Ash that floated into the same porcelain bowl where I used to wash Tomas's baby bottles. The air smelled like the past, burnt and bitter. I didn't cry. I just stood there, feeling the weight lift not from my shoulders, but from my dignity. The first certificate was torn from pride. This one, from greed. That night, while brushing Tomas's hair, he asked, "Why were you crying earlier?" I paused, smiled. Because sometimes, even when no one hurts you, you remember how it felt when they did. He nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing enough to lay his head gently on my arm. I held him tighter, not to shield him, but to remind myself, this is the only truth I ever needed. That night, Tomas asked me why I was crying if no one had hurt me. I told him a bedtime story instead, the kind where the mother wins. The next morning was ordinary in all the usual ways. The hum of the dishwasher, the scent of lemon detergent still clinging to the air. Toast popped up just as the cat meowed to be let out. I buttered one slice for me, jelly for Tomas. Outside, the sun pushed through yesterday's rain, glinting off puddles like nothing had ever gone wrong. I had just sat down at the kitchen table when I noticed it. A plain white envelope buried beneath grocery ads and credit card offers. No return address on the front. But the logo at the top corner was enough. Holloway and Cade Associates. Cade. I didn't open it. Not right away. I placed it beside my coffee mug and stared as the steam from the cup fogged my glasses. Peace ends quietly. Not like an explosion, more like the sound of paper sliding across wood. By the time I peeled the flap open, my toast had gone cold. Inside was a printed letter, formal, sterile. One paragraph stood out. We respectfully request voluntary participation in paternity verification regarding minor child Tomas Vale in relation to medical inheritance documentation. Below that was a consent form, Dorian's name, a clinic address, a scheduled date. I read it once, twice, then again, slowly. Medical inheritance necessity. That was their excuse. The same family that turned its back on a newborn now wanted a sample of his blood, not to mend the damage, but to claim the pieces that might one day benefit them. I whispered aloud, more to myself than anything. They still don't believe him, even when he's theirs. The paper trembled in my hand. And suddenly, I was back in that delivery room, blood seeping through the hospital gown, Dorian's voice cutting through the sterile air. That baby isn't mine. 10 years, and the doubt still echoed. I didn't cry this time. I didn't scream either. I just sat, fingers curled tight around the edge of the table, until the morning slipped quietly into afternoon. Later that week, I called Mara Lynn. We met at the same corner cafe we always had, a little booth near the window where the sun made the formica table shimmer like old vinyl. She listened without interrupting, her latte growing cold. "They're trying to cover themselves," she finally said. "If you comply, they'll twist it, use it, rewrite everything." I nodded slowly. "If I don't, they'll say I'm hiding something. Either way, they get control." She leaned forward. "Then take it back. Make the truth yours first." I stared past her, out the window. A young couple crossed the street, laughing, the woman pregnant and glowing. They looked untouched by the weight of people like Dorian and Marvel. Mara's words stuck, not because they were dramatic, but because they were simple. Take it back. That night, after tucking Tomas in, I sat alone in the kitchen. The same bowl where I had burned Dorian's second attempt at fatherhood sat beneath the sink, now holding loose change and rubber bands. I emptied it, washed it clean. I pulled out a home DNA kit I'd quietly ordered earlier that week. Just initials, LV and TV, no lawyers, no signatures, just truth, sealed in plastic. I placed the swabs into the envelope carefully, like they were glass. "Sometimes survival isn't loud," I said to no one. "It's just persistence disguised as routine." Tomas never asked where I went when I slipped out to mail it. He was busy with a science project, volcanoes and baking soda, and I let him stay busy. I wanted to protect his world, even as mine kept colliding with ghosts. The days that followed were quiet. Rainy mornings, warm soup, homework over the kitchen table. Then one night, as I pulled the covers up to his chin, Tomas turned to me and asked, "Do I look like him?" The room didn't move, the air didn't change, but my chest ached. I brushed his hair back. "You look like me," I said softly, "when I was brave." He smiled, not fully understanding, but satisfied. After he fell asleep, I stood for a long time at the edge of his bed, staring at his peaceful face. On the shelf above the dresser sat the white baby blanket, the one I embroidered in the months before he was born. "Truth will keep you warm." The thread was fraying, the fabric dulled by time, but the words were still there. So was I, still here, still standing. The truth doesn't always arrive like lightning. Sometimes it comes dressed in paper and glue, tucked in with junk mail, waiting like it never left. It was a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that feels like a second Monday, gray sky, lukewarm coffee, and a to-do list that hadn't been touched since Friday. Tomas had already left for school, backpack bouncing behind him like it had a mind of its own. I was rinsing out a mug when the mail slot clinked. Among catalogs and bills was one envelope. No company logo, no markings. Just my name, typed, centered, clinical. I knew what it was before I opened it. I didn't rush. I dried my hands, sat at the kitchen table where sunlight striped across the wood through the blinds. I took a breath so deep it felt like I'd been holding it for a decade. Then I broke the seal. One page, black print, white space. Nothing flowery, nothing dramatic. Just fact. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. I didn't cry. I didn't shout or slam anything. I just let the words float there between me and the light. The page trembled slightly, but my hands did not. 10 years. A baby with a heartbeat and no last name. A mother's love twisted into doubt. A boy growing up with questions I had to answer with half-truths and full heartache. And now, all that uncertainty reduced to a decimal point and a piece of paper. I laughed, quietly, bitterly. The sound came out like air escaping a punctured tire. 10 years of silence, I said out loud, and the truth fits on one damn sheet of paper. I folded it, crisp corners, careful creases. Walked over to the drawer by the pantry. The one where I kept old batteries, rubber bands, and things I wasn't ready to throw away. The baby blanket sat on top. The embroidery thread had faded some, but the words still showed clear. Truth will keep you warm. I slid the paper underneath it. No ceremony, no announcement, just placed. That evening, as I was closing the blinds and thinking about dinner, the phone rang. Dorian. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. "We got the same results," he said, his voice flat. No apology, no emotion. Then, "Mom's asking if you'll come by. She wants to see him." Silence stretched between us like a rubber band pulled too tight. I finally said, "You mean see the proof she threw away 10 years ago?" He hesitated. She's not well. It might be soon." I let the silence breathe. Then maybe she should start telling the truth before she does. I ended the call. No goodbye, no see you later. Just enough time for the weight of my words to land before the line went dead. The next day, Mara came by. I made us coffee the way she liked it. Too much cream, barely sweet. We sat in the kitchen, the same spot where I'd opened the envelope. I slid the paper toward her, along with the original birth certificate, the one Dorian had torn. She read both in silence. Her eyes didn't blink much. "What are you going to do?" she asked finally. I leaned back. "Nothing, not yet." Mara gave me a look, the one that says she knows better. "You're planning something." I smiled faintly. "I'm planning to let the truth do what it does best." She raised a brow. "Wait," I said. She nodded. Didn't press. She never did. After she left, I watched the sun slide lower behind the townhouses across the street. The kitchen filled with that kind of gold light that makes everything look like a memory. Later that night, after Tomas had brushed his teeth and climbed into bed with his favorite book, I sat at my old desk in the corner of the room. I hadn't touched that journal in years, not since the week he was born. I opened to a fresh page, wrote one sentence, "He will see what truth looks like when it doesn't need permission." Then I tucked the test beside the torn certificate. 2 sides of the same decade, one broken by pride, one signed by science. Proof, yes. But more than that, a weapon, a shield, whatever I needed it to be. When the invitation came, I didn't feel surprised, only steady, like I'd been standing in the same place for years, just waiting for someone to catch up. Not for forgiveness, not even for confrontation. Just the moment when silence ended on their side too. It was hand-delivered. Thick ivory cardstock, gold lettering, embossed initials, classy, pretentious, pointless. Inside was Dorian's handwriting, always too neat to be sincere. "Mom wants to see Tomas. It's time to make peace. Peace." The word sat heavy on my kitchen counter while I stood, drying dishes that didn't need drying. I thought about tearing the envelope. My thumb hovered over the edge, ready to split it straight through. But I didn't. I smiled instead, faint, inward. "Peace doesn't come from those who broke it," I whispered. I said yes, not for them, not even for her, for Tomas. He needed to see that truth doesn't just whisper. Sometimes it walks in through the front door, head high, shoulders back. The day of the celebration, summer had started to settle its heat into the sidewalks. We arrived early, me in a simple navy dress, flat scuffed from school runs and grocery store parking lots. Tomas wore a white button-down, hair freshly combed, shoes he picked himself. The banquet hall shimmered, crystal chandeliers, linen tablecloths that cost more than a week's groceries, a string quartet playing a tune no one really listened to. Eyes turned when we walked in. They always do. "Is that her?" a woman near the entrance stage whispered. "The one from before," another murmured, tone thick with mock surprise. "I didn't think she'd show her face," someone else chuckled. I met their gazes, one by one, and smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly, Just the kind of smile you give when you know what they don't. Funny thing about shame, I murmured to Tomas, who was too busy counting light fixtures to notice. It only sticks if you accept it. We made our way through the maze of stairs and champagne flutes. The air smelled like perfume and polite judgment. I spotted Mara near the back, dressed in soft gray, barely noticeable, just how we planned it. Marvel appeared near the head table, stiff but regal, wrapped in silk and status. Her eyes caught mine like a snare. "Leora," she said, reaching out with a trembling hand. "Thank you for coming, dear. You've done well. For yourself." I leaned in, kissed her cheek softly, and smiled. "Thank you. It's easier when you're not being accused of adultery in a hospital gown." The clatter of forks and champagne flutes went silent for half a breath. Dorian flinched. Someone cleared their throat. Tomas looked up at me with a question in his eyes that I answered with a gentle squeeze of his hand. I kept walking. Dinner blurred by, a parade of compliments too loud and glances too sharp. I chewed slowly, nodded politely, and waited. Then Dorian took the stage. Spotlight. Centered. Scripted. He cleared his throat, smile set in place. "I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight as we celebrate 70 years of strength, elegance, and unmatched values." He glanced toward Marvel. "My mother's unwavering belief in family is the reason we're all here." Polite applause, forced smiles. He kept going. Childhood stories, exaggerated nostalgia, a few emotional pauses for effect. And then, without warning, "And I'd like to invite someone special to join me up here. Everyone, meet my son." Tomas looked at me, startled. I felt the shift in the room before I stood. This wasn't pride, it was performance. But I didn't hesitate. I walked up with Tomas beside me. If he was going to be used for their redemption story, I was going to rewrite the ending. Dorian placed a hand on his shoulder like he'd earned the right. Cameras flashed. Laughter murmured. It was all a show. Perfect father, smiling boy, legacy intact. I stepped up to the microphone, my fingers brushing against cold metal. The room quieted. "You tore his birth certificate 10 years ago," I said, voice steady, "because you said he didn't look like you." I pulled the folded document from my clutch, held it up. 10 years later, science disagrees." Gasps rippled like wind across water. Behind us, the photo slideshow, pre-programmed and harmless, flickered. Family vacations, graduations, smiling faces. Then, it changed. A scan of the original birth certificate. His signature, Dorian Cade, scratched out. The hospital logo, date, paternity denied. And finally, the DNA results. The crowd was frozen. Marvel's champagne glass slipped, shattered. Dorian's arm dropped from Tomas's shoulder. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. "Truth doesn't need my permission anymore," I said. Then I stepped off the stage, the microphone still hot behind me, picking up every stunned breath in the room. Chaos erupted. I kept walking, past the tables, past the whispers, past the family tree that had tried to snap me off like a diseased branch. Tomas caught up to me just outside the hall. He looked up, uncertain. "Mom, are you okay?" I crouched down, straightened his collar. "Better than ever," I said. "We don't have to prove who we are anymore." We turned and walked into the early evening. The streetlights hadn't flickered on yet, and the sky glowed that dusty pink that only lasts a few minutes. Behind us, the celebration continued, or tried to. Ahead of us, only light, but even light casts shadows. 2 mornings after the banquet, I stood at the sink, watching steam rise off the coffee pot like it was trying to leave the kitchen too. Tomas was still asleep upstairs, the house quiet in a way that never felt empty, just earned. The phone rang. I didn't jump. I knew it was coming. "Mrs. Vale?" a man said on the other end, clipped and polished. "This is Mr. Tully. I represent Mr. Dorian Cade." I wiped my hands on a dish towel, then leaned against the counter. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Cade wishes to resolve this matter privately." The public display was, in his words, unfortunate and unnecessary. I didn't answer right away. I let the pause breathe. Then I laughed, soft and dry. "Regrettable?" I repeated. "You mean when I told the truth?" He didn't respond, just shifted gears. "We'd like to meet, in person, today, if possible." "Sure," I said. "Let's clean it all up, shall we?" By noon, I was sitting in a cold conference room downtown. Glass walls, silver water pitchers, one framed photo of some nameless skyline that wasn't Houston. Dorian was already seated. Marvel's lawyer, the one from before, nodded at me but didn't smile. A third man was there, unfamiliar, in a crisp suit that looked like it had never met a wrinkle. The new man slid a folder toward me. "Our proposal," he said. Inside, a check for $250,000, a non-disclosure agreement, and a statement I'd have to sign acknowledging that the situation had caused confusion, but no malice. I didn't even look at the dollar amount. "10 years ago," I said, "you tore my name off a birth certificate. Now you want to buy it back. Quietly?" "It's not about that," Dorian muttered. "Of course it is." The younger lawyer spoke up. "It's to protect the family's reputation. Discretion benefits everyone." I closed the folder gently and slid it back across the table. "I'm not for sale, and your name's already out there, just finally standing beside the truth." Tully's voice dropped an octave. "This could all go away." I leaned forward, calm as Sunday morning. "It already did, the moment I stopped caring what you think." That afternoon, I was home again, folding laundry with the windows open, when the phone rang a second time. This time, it was the hospital. Marvel had taken a turn. "It may be time," the nurse said. "She's asking for family." I didn't answer right away. I watched a shirt wrinkle in my hand as I held it too long. Tomas stood in the doorway, holding a peanut butter sandwich like it was fragile. "You always say forgiveness isn't forgetting," he said quietly. I blinked at him. He shrugged. "You just said it louder than usual." He was right. The hospital was quiet. That antiseptic quiet where machines beep slower, nurses talk softer, and time feels sticky. Marvel looked smaller, like someone had shrunk her from the inside. Her silk robe was replaced with pale hospital cotton. Her hair, once tightly coiled and perfect, now gray and thin, stuck to her forehead. She opened her eyes when I stepped in. No smile, no pretense. "You embarrassed us," she rasped. "You did that yourself," I said, calm. She coughed, the sound ragged and deep. "He looks like Dorian," she whispered. "Always did. I just couldn't see it through the shame." I sat beside her, not to argue, not even to comfort, just to witness. "You had 10 years, I said. "You chose pride." Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. Maybe she couldn't anymore. "I was afraid of what it would mean. For us, for him, for me." "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm afraid I'll never see him as I should have." I looked at her, this woman who once denied my child his name because of skin and story. I took her hand, dry, light, so light it felt like paper. "Then see him now," I said, "before there's nothing left to see." Outside, the sky burned orange, streaks of pink brushing the clouds like someone had spilled fire. Marilyn stood by her car, arms crossed. "Well," she said, "did it feel worth it?" I leaned against her fender and sighed. "The truth always is," I said, "even when it burns." She smiled. "You think he'll ever apologize?" I shook my head. "No, but silence can be an apology too, when it comes from someone who never shuts up." We laughed, soft and tired. That evening, at home, Tomas sat at the kitchen table doing math homework. I set a cup of cocoa beside him, then sat across. He glanced at a folder I'd left out, the DNA test. He picked it up, scanned the page, lips moving as he read. "So, he really is my dad?" I nodded. "Yes, but being your mother, that's my victory." He smiled, the kind of smile that only happens when a kid knows something big just landed, but also knows they're safe. I took the paper gently, folded it once, then tucked it into the old photo album beside a wrinkled baby picture of him in the hospital bassinet. The white blanket was still there too, faded now, edges fraying, but it held, just like we did. "Truth kept us warm, didn't it?" I said. Tomas nodded, then went back to his homework. The kitchen filled with the sound of pencils on paper, the hum of the fridge, and the quiet breathing of a home that had finally stopped holding its breath. Years passed the way sunlight fades, slowly, then all at once. And somehow, 5 of them had gone. This morning, the house was still the same one I'd fought for, wept in, built again and again in small, invisible ways. But the boy who padded down the stairs now, he wasn't the same. Tomas was taller than me now, his voice deeper, his humor sharper. But there was still that same light in him, the one that never dimmed, even when it flickered. He grabbed his backpack off the dining chair, slinging it over one shoulder. As he turned, something fell, soft, white, familiar. The corner of that old blanket slipped out from a shelf above the shoe rack. He picked it up, running his fingers along the frayed hem. "You kept this?" he asked, not accusing, just curious. I nodded, pouring coffee slowly into my favorite chipped mug. "It's part of our story." Tomas wrapped it around his shoulders like it had always belonged there. "It's warm," he said. "It always was," I answered, almost whispering. He looked at me and smiled, and for a moment I didn't see 15. I saw the baby he'd been and the man he'd become, and the fire I'd walked through to get him here. Later that week, I checked the mailbox like I always did. Routine more than necessity. Bills, coupons, a postcard from an old neighbor who'd moved to Oregon, and then a typed envelope, no return address, but the typeface was familiar. Inside, a letter. From Dorian. No handwriting, just carefully aligned words. "I heard Tomas made the honor roll. Congratulations. I hope you're both doing well." No apology, but no defensiveness either. Just facts. A statement with its ego stripped away. I folded it once and slid it under the drawer, the same place where the DNA results still lay, untouched but never forgotten. "Growth doesn't always come with words," I murmured. "Sometimes silence is the best confession." That evening, the sun was setting in a wash of gold behind the house. I brought out 2 glasses of iced tea to the porch, where Tomas was strumming chords on his guitar, half melody, half memory. He set it down and leaned back, legs stretched out. "Do you ever hate him?" he asked, eyes not leaving the sky. It took me a second, not because I didn't have an answer, but because the answer had changed. "No," I said finally. "I hated how small he made me feel. How long I let him." Tomas nodded, thoughtful. He was always that. Even as a toddler, he'd stare at bugs like they had secrets to tell. "So, we won?" I laughed, not loud, just enough for him to hear the truth in it. "We didn't win, honey. We just stopped playing their game." He looked at me then, really looked, and I could see he understood. The porch light flicked on above us, casting a soft glow across the steps. Later that night, after dishes and homework and kisses on the forehead, I sat at my desk, the same one I'd once cried over with a legal notice in hand. I opened the journal I'd nearly forgotten I owned, the one I hadn't touched since the night I decided to stop waiting for apologies. I turned to a fresh page and wrote, Forgiveness isn't a door you open, it's a window you learn to live beside. The words sat there quietly, like they'd always been waiting for me. I capped the pen, glanced at the clock, 11:11. My reflection stared back from the glass, older now, softer in some ways, not weaker, just worn like leather that fits better the more it's used. In the next room, Tomas played a soft tune on the piano. Hesitant at first, then steady. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. Morning again. The light slipped in through the slats of the blinds, reaching across the floor like it was searching for something. I made coffee, same way I had for years. Then, without thinking, I reached for the white blanket. I draped it over my shoulders and stepped onto the porch, steam rising from my mug, the air crisp, the sky stretched wide and forgiving. No thunder, no noise, just a soft breeze and the sound of a world moving forward. "We're okay now," I whispered. Not because someone said sorry, not because someone changed, but because I did. Inside, the piano stopped. The house held still. And in that stillness, I finally felt free. Matra wantbor,